Welcome to the HR Empowerment Podcast, where we will uncover strategies and new insights from HR professionals who discuss up-to-date regulations, best practices, and the most pressing topics like diversity and equity, leadership, dealing with difficult situations, and much more that affect your bottom line and business. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back. Wendy Sellers here, the HR lady. I'm here with my co-host, JC.
Wendy,
hey,
it's a pleasure to see you on the line today. You're finally here.
Yes, absolutely. I feel like I've been all over the country the past few weeks, but now I'm ready to rock and roll, and I am so excited about our guest today, who has a book as well. Don't hope for a great team, build one. Oh yes, I love it. I love it. Welcome to the show, Patrick Veroneau. How you doing?
Hey, good. Thank you so much, Wendy. Good to see you as well, JC. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Hey, how are you calling in from?
So I'm up in Maine, South Portland, Maine, actually.
All right.
So right on the coast.
All right. So we got Maine, we got Buffalo covered, and we got Florida covered down here too. I'm in St. Pete, Florida. JC's in Buffalo. So we're kind of like going on the East Coast, right?
That's you kind of Gulf Coast for you in some regard, right? We have a house down in Estero too. I love it down there.
Yeah, I do. I love the Gulf Coast so much more than the other coast, but I'll take any, right? As long as it's by water, except during hurricane season, then I don't like it so much. With that said, hey, I want to, just kind of dive right in here. You are a TEDx speaker. That is awesome. And a best-selling author of The Leadership Bridge, How to Engage Your Employees and Drive Organizational Excellence. And then the missing pieces, don't hope for a great team, build one. Tell us, a little bit about your experience and how you're going to help our listeners today.
Yeah, so I've been at this since about 2008, working with different teams. I actually spent a lot of my career in the biotech industry and was a rep, was a trainer, was involved in leadership training. And really, that's where this interest came from in terms of looking at how do we create great teams and great leaders. And there's a lot of science behind how we do that. What are the behaviors that we can look back on that really create engagement and the things that make people want to be part of a team and produce? So I've taken that same approach, and that's really how I developed or wrote the first book, The Leadership Bridge. And the second book actually is in the process of being edited. So I'm going to give you the updated title of it now. It's The Missing Piece: What Great Teams Do That Others Overlook.
Oh, I love it. The official
title of this now. Yeah.
I love it.
I'm so excited for this one.
That's very cool. So wait a minute. You're telling me that great teams aren't born?
Great teams are not born. They are designed. They're absolutely designed.
They really are. They're intentionally built through, specific research-backed behaviors practiced consistently over and over and over again until we know it like the back of our hand, right?
Yeah. And it's interesting. So I've worked with hundreds of different leaders from different organizations over the past decade or so, and especially around what creates great teams. I think right now, especially, the buzzword is accountability, right? We need accountability. And I'm all about accountability, but when that's where we start, it won't be durable. You can't start with accountability to create great teams. Great teams don't do that. They do a couple other things before that. They support each other, which is they have each other's backs. They demonstrate that through behaviors. And also they celebrate each other, which is all about recognition and appreciation. And when you do those two things, that's the missing piece that brings you from accountability to ownership, which is a completely different environment. That's what great teams are. Great teams are about ownership, not about accountability.
It's interesting when you talk about the ownership of it all, because there's like that other side of it, right? It's a little bit of culture in a way. Teams that foster high psychological safety, they're 27% more likely to have highly engaged employees and 50% more likely to achieve gains in productivity. And that ultimately all highlights the strong connection between trust, openness, and performance. And I don't know, maybe there's good teams out there that are all into stovepiping and micromanagement, and that's the way to do it because the knife hand tells you to. But I don't know, something tells me that's not right. I don't know. Talk to me, Patrick.
And again, you can have an average team or you're a struggling team. And when you do that, that's when you don't have that trust. You lack psychological safety. It's exactly it. When you have each other's backs, and I literally just had this conversation with 3 different groups this morning about the idea of around when we have each other's backs, right? We're not afraid to talk about the issues that need to be talked about, either because we're afraid we're going to be retaliated against or fired or ridiculed. We openly talk about the things that need to be talked about because we're in an environment where it's like we're doing this to get better, not to make each other look worse.
Right. And you've said, extraordinary teams are explained. They're engineered, I believe, is the word that you use. And that, again, great teams aren't born, but they're intentionally built through consistent research-backed behavior. I love that. I love research. I love facts. Yes, I like feelings and everything, but I'm like, show me the facts. Show me the facts, because the facts are what really matter. And facts change over time, right? I love how you break it down into support, celebrate, and challenge. I've got your back. I see you. I push you. That's such a clear blueprint for culture.
And if you think about that, right, the average and the struggling teams, they start with the challenge and then they work backwards. The sequence is wrong, right? How many times have you heard that? Like, we're going to hold people accountable, and when they deliver on that, then we'll support them. Then we'll recognize them or appreciate them. And it's the opposite of great teams.
Yeah,
great teams
really
they do that last, right? Because you have to earn that space. And all of us can relate to that. When you think about being called out on something, if you're called out on something by somebody you don't trust, that hasn't had your back in the past, that hasn't recognized or appreciated you for the things that you have, the contributions you have made, that doesn't land well. I think accountability is the low bar in an organization. You shouldn't settle for accountability. That's the low bar.
Love it. I absolutely love this. And, I want to actually dig into this engineered part a little bit more. When you say extraordinary teams are engineered, what's the first lever a leader should pull if they want to start that transformation tomorrow?
It's interesting. So there's a model that I put together called Cables, which it aligns with what we're doing. And in the book, I talk about a bridge in Scotland. It's the Queensferry Bridge. It's a 3-towered cable-stayed bridge. It was completed in 2017. It's the longest 3-tower cable-stayed bridge in the world. And it represents to me the 3 things that we talk about here: support, celebrate, and challenge. Each of those towers, when they were constructed, individually are worthless. Can't do anything with them. It's not till they're connected that the strength of that bridge and its utility becomes available. And that is the difference in this model. Is the missing piece is that piece that's connecting them. Once they're all together, which is about accountability, now you can travel in either direction. You have something that is usable, and it can support a lot of stress, right? Which is road traffic.
Yeah.
Even a modest 1% improvement in performance each day, it can compound over time. Yeah. And it ultimately results in nearly 37 times better results by the end of a single year than anything else out there. It truly becomes a testament to the powerful impact of consistent, incremental, iterative processes. Back to you.
So JC, I talk about that in the book, and I also talk about it from the standpoint, right? We often think of the 1% gain, and that helps keep people motivated in terms of saying, you don't notice the day-to-day improvement that's going to be made. But over time, if you could almost pick yourself up and move yourself out 70 days or beyond, you've doubled at that point. You'd notice it then. So it's almost like you got to stay with it. But with that comes the downside. And that's that we don't notice 1% shifts that go in the opposite direction. And this is when we stop paying attention to the things that got us to that place in the first place. So we stop listening or appreciating people or challenging each other the same way. It goes longer in terms of the times that when we meet and get together and connect, we don't notice those short misses. But all of a sudden, over time, we go out, and is it 70 days? Maybe it's a year. All of a sudden, you get to a point. It's like, how did we get here? How did this crisis happen? Because you didn't notice it was happening until it was too late. And that could be in a marriage. It could be in any other relationship. You don't notice the things that made you successful, you stop doing them.
It's interesting about the regression too, when we just latch onto that real quick, especially from a leadership perspective. And I say leadership perspective, it could be a manager, it could be anyone out there. But as you're having that 1% incremental loss, depending on the culture that you've built or the type of individual that you are, sometimes all of that might not even matter. I'm going to throw a spin on this and tell me what you think here. I mean, we might literally have a situation where there could be a minor echo chamber amongst the people that we surround ourselves with, right? And it might not necessarily be our employee base. It could be our peers. It could be anyone along the way. And we could have the best culture in the world, but as we're slowly regressing, if we're getting nothing but yeses, if we're not taking that hard critical look or being open to receiving that necessary feedback, because we're striving to be the best tomorrow, we lose sight of where we are today in a way, because we've cultivated the echo chamber without realizing maybe. I don't know. What do you think, Patrick?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's always possible, right? And I often think of the challenge piece of this is hopefully that's the piece that evaporates the echo chamber, because it really is all about pushing each other to be different. Right. And to think differently, not to get stuck in that rut. And when you catch yourself in that, it's like you're pushing each other to make sure you're staying out of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that. Like, let's not get stuck in a rut. And I want to go back to something else you were saying previously, too, because it matches a chapter in my book, Suck It Up, Buttercup, Be a Leader, People Will Follow. Chapter, I think it's 9, is about shut up and listen. If you want to be a leader that people will willingly follow, you need to shut up and listen. And we often don't do that because we're busy. I don't think it's usually intentional, but we're busy. We're doling out orders and support and, holding people accountable. But like you said, it's not just about accountability. It's about everything else. So thank you for that.
Wendy, it's interesting you talk about listening too and the importance of it.
What? No, I'm just kidding.
It's a superpower. I think of listening as a superpower. It's one of the cables in the model that I speak about. And I developed a listening model that I use with all of my clients called authentic listening. And we generally will talk about things like reflective listening or active listening. Those are like the high bars of how we want to listen. Mm-hmm. And somewhat cynical at times, I think, coming from a sales background, is that I can listen reflectively and actively, but still use it in a way that is for my own personal gain. If I know how to use those, because I create a level of comfort with people that they think because that I'm reflectively listening to them or demonstrating that I'm listening, it can fool them into thinking that I care about them, when maybe it's I care about myself, but I know that tactic works, if that makes sense. Yeah, no, absolutely. It does make sense to me. And I know your new book is not out yet, so I'm not sure which chapter it is going to land up in. But I wanted to talk about, turning insight into action, like the week 3 to 6 dip. Can't talk today. Your implementation roadmap predicts a slump a month in. So is that like a month into a project, a month into a new hire, both, and or what? What do you mean by that? So I think what happens is, and I'm blanking on the term that it's called right now. I think it's the Valley of Despair, and it's by a researcher. I think his last name is Kelly, and the model that they speak about says that people come in sort of with a sense of optimism at the beginning, right? You show up to a workshop, you learn something new, and you're like, "This is going to be great," and all of a sudden the next day shows up, and then what happens? You're in one ear and out the other. Like, oh no, it didn't work the way it worked yesterday in the workshop. And then that's really where the moment of that valley of despair comes in. And you have the choice of either you fight through it and you start coming up the other side, or you rinse and repeat. You stop this workshop, then you go on to something else 2 months down the road, and you're like, maybe this will be the thing that will change our direction. And I think expectation is really important here. And I speak to that valley of despair when we do these workshops of like almost prepping people, like, get ready. We're all excited today. We're going to leave here and you're not going to be tomorrow, right? You're going to try and have one of these conversations that seemed like it was going to go just the way you thought it was. And it's not. It's going to blow up on you.
The informed pessimism a little bit there, eh?
Yeah, you almost have to prepare for it. And I think with that comes a lot of check-ins in the beginning, just seeing where are we? How are we doing on this? What's working? What isn't working? It's like anything that we do to form a new habit, the only way we change that is through repetition. Have to do the reps.
Yeah.
Intellectually, we can read about it till we can recite it perfectly. But unless we're doing it, we won't get any stronger. It would be like reading Muscle and Fitness magazine about building more muscles in your chest, but never doing a push-up or anything to develop that. You can know how to do it. You will never get any stronger. From your brain to your chest is not going to make that happen.
That is such a great analogy. I'm just giggling over here because that's a great analogy. But JC did find out information on the Valley of Despair that he wanted to explain real quick.
Yeah, absolutely. And don't forget, EmoryLeadershipGroup.com. You could probably find a little bit about this there. I don't know. Just check out that website is all I know. But let me tell you something. The Valley of Despair. It's a concept from the emotional cycle of change, developed by psychologists Don Kelly and Daryl Conner in the 1970s. It's the third stage in a 5-phase journey that people commonly experience when navigating voluntary change. Back to you.
Yeah, it's voluntary change. That's super important. So that goes back to, making sure if you're forcing some kind of change among people, getting them to be bought into it somehow, some way in the beginning, because that's definitely going to help turn insight into action, which I believe is covered in your book as well, correct?
Yes. So in chapter 2, I talk about a belief system. Not a belief system, but a belief system. And the importance of that is that in workshops that I've been involved in, when a company brings me in, there's often this, you're here to make us drink the Kool-Aid. That's the belief system of the company. And really, so think about it from the standpoint of building a great team. Unless people believe it's important to have a great team, that will not happen. You have to believe that the work that goes into this to build a great team is worth it. And then the other part of a belief system is you have to believe that you have the ability to do this. And those are separate, right? One is motivation and the other is ability. But if you don't have the first one, it's very difficult to make it successful with the second one. Just ability.
So you need the belief, and then you also need execution, right? Yeah. There's the implementation reality. 70% of strategic initiatives fail, not due to poor strategy, but poor execution. Knowledge without application is expensive entertainment. And I think it's the same exact thing when you add in, okay, do the people the people that are on the team, do they believe in the outcome? Do they believe that this is going to do what we intended to do? Because if they don't, they themselves have already killed that project.
Exactly.
Sure.
JC.
In 2025, 79% of failed strategic initiatives, they were linked, at least in part, to poor collaboration across teams. Back to the core of how essential cross-functional cooperation is key here. Back to you.
Yeah. And what about, let's talk a little bit more about, Patrick, about the predictable pattern, from weeks 1 all the way through, month 3. I believe it's like weeks 1 and 2 is high energy, good intentions. And then, what am I doing here? Why did I take this job? Right.
Yeah.
So leaders that are listening today, HR leaders, managers, you really have to still have those good intentions. And what Patrick was saying is about the believing, and then believing in the employees as well. Right.
It's so true that, and there's, if you look at some of the research around things like Pygmalion effect, right, or Golem effect as it relates to expectations, right? If you don't expect your employees can do this, that's all that Pygmalion and Golem was about. Is it's been replicated hundreds of times where, if the people didn't believe that those people were able to perform at that level, they treated them that way. It's almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you don't expect it yourself, it's hard to, I think, work through the challenges that you might run into because you've already sort of thought to yourself, we're not going to be able to do this.
Right. And then we have this other thing called, soft skills that we need, right? Nobody needs those, right?
Yeah. Do you know what's fascinating? Do you know where the term soft skills that was originated?
I
it's
don't.
From the Army. It's from the Army.
Oh.
It's back in the late 60s. I think it was around 1968. And they termed soft skills as a way to disseminate training that they did. Hard skills were working with machinery,
Physical.
tanks, guns. And then they realized that they needed other skills in terms of leadership, communication. So as a way to separate which skills they were going to be working on at which time, one was called hard skills, one was called soft skills. That was all around communication. And what's interesting is that even during the time that they had labeled them as soft skills, there was concern at that point that somehow they were going to be seen as weak because they were called soft. So even back then.
Yeah, absolutely. I wish they named it something else, to be quite honest, because it's necessary. You could have, be the strongest person physically in the room or have the strongest technology skills. But if you cannot communicate with the person sitting next to you, regardless of what your role is, the plane's still going to crash. So you have to make sure you understand that it's not a weak skill. But let's switch gears here and talk about, system skills. I believe you focus on this as well. What is this thing called cables?
Yeah. So cables are really the 6 behaviors that have all been researched that if you think about it, just like this cable-stayed bridge, those are what support the weight of that bridge. And the more you behave in certain ways in those cables, the stronger your bridge becomes. And those behaviors that I speak to about building these sort of relationship bridges are consistency, which is walking the talk, appreciation, which is about recognizing people for what they are and what they do, belongingness, which is all about the need to create connection between people on teams, listening, which I just mentioned, that authentic listening, which the last piece of that I didn't mention was listening with respect. Yes. Which that's the difference. And then empathy is the 5th cable. And then the last cable is specifics, which is all about setting clear expectations and also follow through on those. And as well as decisiveness, and that is in specifics.
I love it. I love that analogy: consistency, appreciation, belongingness, listening, empathy, and being specific. Now, if a manager said, hey, I've got to work on all of these or a couple of these. And if they could only fix one of the cable's behavior, let's just say this quarter, which one has the highest return on investment in your opinion? And how do we measure it?
Yeah, that's a tough one. But if I were going to go with one, I would go with consistency in regards to walking the talk. And the reason I would probably go with that one first is that if I think about walking the talk, well, what I would expect from somebody else, then I would be doing it myself. So that covers a lot of ground, right? If I expect others to be good at follow through, well, then I better be good at follow through too. I need to walk the talk on that. If I expect others to demonstrate respect toward other people on the team, then I better be respectful of people on the team. If I expect people to listen, I better be a good listener. All of those things, right? That would be the one that I would come to first.
Yeah, and then the other thing I would also say about the consistency part is if you are consistently, treating people similarly and asking the same questions in interviews, so on and so forth, you're going to get yourself away from lawsuits as well, right?
Yeah, and that's an interesting part, Wendy, though, is that, right, let's face it, there are people that we connect with better, we like better on teams. But the difference is when it comes to consistency, we have to treat people by the same set of rules. That to me is the difference. It's not to say that you don't like somebody more than you like somebody else, but you can't allow that to make you inconsistent in terms of how you manage or treat that person as it relates to that.
Yeah, I love it. And I personally also really like to focus on appreciation. Like I think all these things in the cables analogy is super important, but appreciation, people aren't going to turn down money if you send them a bonus, right? But it's not expensive. It's a little time consuming, but it's really not expensive to show appreciation. A sincere and specific thank you. So it also comes into the S word there, the specificity. I can't say that word. If your appreciation is very sincere and specific, it's going to mean a lot to people instead of just saying, great job. Like, hey, great job getting us in, ahead of schedule with limited errors, Wendy. And it's like, oh, thank you. You've noticed what I was doing. Thank you very much. So I think JC has some stats he wanted to share about appreciation.
Yeah, absolutely. And before I do, just real quick, I've read a lot of these models. I've seen a lot of presentations, but your emphasis of specificity really stands out to me, Patrick. It does. I find that to be I find it to be quite unique and in a very positive way, I kind of love it a little bit. Anyways, when managers actively you're welcome. When managers actively show appreciation and give true, genuine recognition for their team's contributions, employee engagement can increase by as much as 60%, ultimately leading to stronger commitment, higher morale, and improved overall performance. Back to you.
That's amazing. Now, I wanted to kind of stay on this similar topic, talking about cables and that they're system skills, not soft skills. But there's another analogy called needs that you talk about. What is that?
Yeah. So needs are human drivers that we all have. So there are a lot of different pieces of research out there. Probably the one that this model's closest to is a model called SCARF, which was developed by a neuroscientist named David Rock. So needs are these 5 drivers that when they're satisfied, people become more engaged. They become more collaborative, and when they're absent, the opposite happens, right? People become less engaged. So needs stands for, the N is for network. Again, it's about belongingness. We need to feel connection.
Yeah.
We're pack animals on many levels, that we need connection. The other one is that people want to feel equal treatment. It's another, right? So it's around fairness. The next one is people also want to be empowered. They want to feel as though they have some say over how they do things and that they're able to almost use their talents to the best of their abilities, right? With that, they also want to feel respected, I would say, and that's the D in that model.
Dignity,
yeah, dignity, right? It's respect. It's feeling valued, how I'm treated, and then the last one is that they want stability, which is I want to feel as though I have some sense of what the rules of the road are here and what the expectations are. Those are important drivers, and they all have a neurological component to them when they're absent. I think one of the ones that's probably most, I find most important is the one around network and belonging, that there's a lot of research that looks at when people feel as though they have been excluded from a group, that the same part of the brain that experiences physical pain is the part of the brain that is activated when somebody is excluded from a group or feels a sense of rejection. That's pretty powerful in terms of
very powerful. It's very powerful. So the needs explains disengagement. So let me just repeat it. It's network, equal treatment, empowerment, dignity, and stability. And this predicts whether people lean in or they check out. Whether they're still taking your paycheck or not, they may be checking out, right? So thank you for that. Before we wrap up, I do have another question or statement, I guess. And, like celebration and appreciation, it isn't just about morale. It's neurological fuel, as you've already mentioned.
Yeah.
Authentic recognition actually releases a dopamine, right?
Yeah.
And that strengthens your motivation and your memory. Well, I definitely need that because my memory is shot. Thank you, menopause. But conversely, when expected recognition is gone, it's absent. Like you're thinking I was going to get some kind of recognition and you're going to get anything. This is what you're talking about, where the brain activates the pain centers leading to disengagement. It's like, boof, the science of recognition. Who thought that all of this leadership and management stuff comes down to science?
Yeah, and that's one of the towers that I speak about in the model. Support, celebrate is that piece, and it needs its own piece. I've had people say, well, how come it's not just part of support? Because it needs its own space. I think across companies, I think it's one of the things that we do the least effectively in terms of recognizing people consistently, that the cadence is there. Yet it has the most return on investment, I think, for the smallest amount of effort, right? To say thank you to somebody sincerely, all that stuff, it goes it goes so far. It's the right thing to do, but also it provides fuel and morale for companies.
And so in that sequence of support, celebration, and challenge, you put challenge last in that sequence. Yeah. Why is it so important that support and celebration, really do come first? And more importantly, what happens when leaders skip those steps?
Yeah. So it's so important because when they do it the right way, when they build the foundation of demonstrating they have somebody's back, which is through support, and they also recognize them for what they're doing, for the contributions they make, that when they go to challenge people, they've earned the right to do that.
Yes.
And it's an obligation at that point, I think, to do that, right? How do we get better? It's not like I only call you up with the stuff you're not doing right. I also have your back, and I've supported you when you are doing the things right. When the leaders go to that first, which is really what average and struggling teams commonly do. That's why they're in those places. They go to accountability first, and they expect that once that happens, then they will deliver support and recognition. It's in the wrong order. It's just the sequence is wrong. The missing piece is accountability here. And that only happens when you start first with support and celebrate.
I love it. So remind us again, I know your new book is not out yet, but what is the final title of the new book going to be, and when will it be out, do you think? So
final title is The Missing Piece, What Great Teams Do That Others Overlook. And hopefully it will be out by the end of November. That's the
right
timeline on this. Yeah.
Excellent.
So it's with the editor at this point, so it's out of my hands.
And they're like, you can't have it back. I know how that goes. They're like, stop touching it. It's too late to make changes. Exactly. So, Patrick, how can people connect with you if they want to find out more information?
Yeah, one of the best ways is through LinkedIn. I'm on there, Patrick Veroneau. That's probably the best way, especially because a lot of my articles, all the things that I do, I publish on that. My website is Emery Leadership Group, and that's EMERY leadershipgroup.com. That's the other way that they can reach out to me, but LinkedIn is probably the best.
Okay. I will make sure that your contact information is in the podcast notes. Mr. TEDx speaker and best-selling author.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for all of this. This has really, opened my eyes and just reminded me of a few things that I may have forgot about. So thank you. And I hope everybody that's tuning in, I hope this session has been beneficial to you. Reminder, if you listen to this podcast directly on the HR Empowerment website, you can also receive HRCI and SHRM credits. Simply go to auroratrainingadvantage.com, look for the training tab, and then find the podcast there. Take care, everybody, and thanks for joining us.
Thanks so much.
Thank you for joining the HR Empowerment Podcast, brought to you by Aurora Training Advantage. We hope you've gained new insight and strategies to navigate the HR profession. We look forward to you joining us again on the HR Empowerment Podcast.